Hi, I'm Brad Vassar here with Thad Williamson, who's running for Richmond City Council representing the 5th District. Thad, how's it going?
Very good today. How are you, Brad?
Doing good. First, I'd like to start with how things began with you, right? What inspired you to run for the City Council?
Sure. So I've lived in the city of Richmond for 14 years, and I've studied cities actually going back 30 years. So I'm a political scientist. I teach at the University of Richmond. And I've written two books actually about cities. Um, and then in the last few years, I've become extremely involved in city of Richmond affairs. So previous Mayor Jones had a anti-poverty commission, and I ended up writing the final report for that group to sort of get a handle on how we could really do something about our 25% poverty rate, which is, I think, the fundamental challenge facing our community. So out of that work came a new agency called the Office of Community Wealth Building, which helps people find living wage jobs. And I was the first director of that and was charged with sort of putting a strategy in place, getting funding, getting some collaborations going, hiring key staff, and positioning it for future success. Then a little bit later, I worked in the mayor's office part-time, also teaching at the university for Mayor Stoney for about a year and a half. So I've been very involved in things to do with poverty, with education, with transportation, with housing, and also just general performance management issues in the city. And so what I see is we have an opportunity as a city to sort of put away that capital to Confederacy label and become something much better. I'd like to think of it as a capital of community wealth building and racial equity together, and take advantage of this historical opportunity to use our growth in a deliberate way to include people who have been historically left out. So that's why I'm running, because I think the opportunity is there to really do great things in the city. City council is an important position because it controls the dollars. That's probably the most important thing that it can do that no one else can do. And I think I have the most experience to represent the 5th District, in the final year of this term that we're all running for.
Right. So let's think about the big picture. And
Mm-hmm.
you've mentioned racial equity
Mm-hmm.
and poverty rates. So, what other issues or projects, if any, do you think Richmond should prioritize in the next few years if elected?
Well, I think improving the Richmond Public Schools is really at the top of my list, because if we can improve confidence in the schools, then the younger families who are coming here are going to want to stay here. And we have to get to the point as a community where it's no longer about I'm zoned for a quote good school or not. It has to be that every school is a school that we can have confidence in. But I understand, that we have 40% child poverty rate. It's not just about the schools. It's about what's going on at home. It's in the community. So we have to work with the parents to provide those job opportunities. We have to work on parents when they're young to teach them the value of getting their kids into pre-K, making sure that they're reading to kids when they're younger. We have to provide after-school programs. We have to provide wraparound support services. It's a whole community effort. It's not just what happens inside the school building. So I think those two things together are the challenge that our city faces, and everything else to me is how do we free up resources to make those things happen. And that does mean we have to do a better job paving the roads and providing basic services, because citizens expect and need better service from the city. But my focus is going to be making city government work as effectively as possible so we can get as many dollars as possible into the things that matter.
Right. So it seems like there's always something going on in Richmond, and one of the issues we've heard about recently is the Navy Hill
Mm-hmm.
redevelopment plan.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm interested, which for those who don't know is a huge overhaul with the Coliseum and the surroundings. Where do you stand on that? What's your position?
Yeah, so I think that it's important for people to understand that we're a landlocked city. We can't expand geographically outward. We have a lot of land is taken up by public entities like VCU and like state government that are not taxable. And then we have this area of downtown that's really not being used. And plus, as I mentioned, we have a 25% poverty rate. So we have to figure out something to bring economic development downtown. I'm in the process of evaluating whether this is the right thing to do. And so City Council, as you know, has created an extensive review process to vet this deal. So I'm looking for 5 things. The numbers have to hold up. And so whatever the taxpayer risk is has to be transparent and understood. Secondly, there has to be job opportunities for Richmond residents that have to be prioritized according to fair labor standards. Thirdly, the minority contract piece has to be like robust and enforceable. Fourth, it has to add to our affordable housing stock. And lastly, there has to be public buy-in to a project this magnitude. This is not just like a regular project. This is something that could commit the city, to 30 years. And my judgment is now is the public is not really on board with this. But I want to see the process play out. If I'm elected, I'll schedule community meetings, as many as needed, so that every resident can get their question posed directly, to developers and the people trying to promote this. And then they have to be able to answer the questions. And if all the questions aren't answered satisfactorily, I won't be able to vote for it. But maybe there's a way we can get something positive out of it. And if this project doesn't work, there's going to be another one. So my other thought process in this is, let's use this opportunity to do policy right. We need to build in progressive economic development standards to everything that we do, whether this project goes forward or it doesn't.
And another question important to ask is what we're doing with our government spending, the government budget. And earlier this year, as you know, the mayor proposed raising the real estate tax, so which we really didn't go through. So I'm curious to know what your plan is to better balance the government's budget.
Well, the mayor has to introduce a balanced budget by law. And then, the challenge is always in the city of Richmond is that there are enormous needs and not enough of a tax base. And that's why we do need economic development. We do need to be proactively looking at ways to add on to that tax base, but do it in a way where the burden especially isn't falling on folks who have been in their house for a long time, who are limited income. And that's one of the challenges, like a broad-based property tax increase. So I think going forward, we have to try to get more nuanced policy tools so that if there's an increase in tax burden for a really good reason, it doesn't fall on those who are already economically of limited means. And I think there are other communities do this kind of thing all the time. We just need to get the permission from the state to do those things. In terms of future tax increases, I hope to avoid it completely, but I'm never going to say never, because as I said, I think the schools are the most important priority, and their strategic plan does need to be fully funded.
Right. So to wrap things up, let's push citywide problems to the side,
okay,
and focus on the 5th District.
Yeah.
So what sort of ideas do you have to better the lives of citizens living within those city limits?
Yeah, and so again, obviously schools, but in addition to schools that we already talked about, the 5th District has a lot of parks that really add to our quality of life. And I want to see the Parks and Recreation Department, including the James River Park System, have more investment, but both the staff and the quality of programming and simple upkeep of the park. A lot of complaints about roads that need to be addressed, and there's a $15 million paving program going on now. I want to make sure that the 5th District is getting its share of that, and that the paving is done really well. There's a lot of concerns about alley cleanup. So you have to be very attentive to those issues that affect everyday life. But really, I think people, in the community, they can deal with a lot of things, but what they can't deal with is seeing youth not have opportunities, and so I'll be trying to focus really hard on two things specifically for the 5th District. One is to bring the Office of Community Wealth Building that I mentioned before into the 5th District so that it can help residents, whether they're youth or adults, find better jobs. I think that's critical to driving down our poverty rate. And secondly, the George Wythe High School on the south side is run down. It's starting to get overcrowded. We need to make that a model community school by rebuilding it. I want to find the money to do that as soon as possible. So those are like the two big things, community wealth building and George Wythe High School. I would hope to be able to get done in the first year if elected, in addition to all the sort of routine issues of city business.
And what's the beginning to facing those two challenges?
Both of those, it's really just dollars, and so it's going in there, knowing what you're doing with the budget, with the scalpel, and raising tough questions to say, do we really need to keep doing this when we have this other community need over here that's being addressed? And also when new revenues come on board. So for instance, the Rosie's, betting parlor on the south side, that's going to eventually generate significant new revenue stream for the city. So I want to lead the conversation about how we're going to make sure that's benefiting, education and our other, primary needs.
Right. Well, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I mean, I love the city of Richmond. I have a vast amount of experience in City Hall. I know the institution inside and out, and I understand very well what City Council can do and what it can't do. That there are limitations to it. I'm going to be very focused on using, uh, the abilities it does have to get things done in the 5th District with basically no drop off in service or performance from what people have been used to under Parker Agelasto.
I'm Brad Vassar, talking with Thad Williamson. Thank you.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.